Good. Here we go. Hello everyone. How are you doing? Right, it's been a long time, so I'm sorry for last week change of planning. I'm just going to be a bit closer. Okay, I'm sorry for last week change of planning, and I should have warned you before, right? But the planning for the first week was a bit changed, and we had some virtual meetings and so on. Right. So now we're back for some kind of similar rhythm. I've sent you a message telling you that this week we should meet like today and Wednesday. We have to discuss if we meet on next Friday, as next Friday is another holiday, as you want. The problem is that the week after, right, I still have to virtually interview some candidates for the OIB. So I won't be able to teach classes on Wednesday. Possibly I will be able to do some on next Friday. Sorry, I have to shut the door. Otherwise the cat will come in and walk in front of the camera. Today, next Wednesday, we can discuss for next Friday. I mean, I'm available and I can wake up a bit early and maybe teach 1 hour if you want. Next Monday, and not next Wednesday for sure, okay, because I'll be evaluating candidates. So that's it. So I hope everybody is okay. As I've told you in my message, in the mail I've sent you, the equivalent of news, the amount of news I have from Cambridge is actually null. So there's not much more I can tell you. This is the reason why I've not planned any oral so far, because I mean, we don't know. And I have no clue. I have no clue about the written assessment I should give you as a final mark. I have no clue about the oral assessment you should receive as a final mark. I have zero indicator. Okay, so believe me that as early as I get some, you'll be told, and you'll get an immediate knowledge about this, but so far, we are lost in translation, more or less. Okay? Don't worry if I teach a class on Friday, it might be later. Or we can also decide that holidays are holidays. I mean, if we meet today and we meet on Wednesday, it might be enough. Okay? So, we'll see for this. Don't worry, I have no intention of waking up early just for waking up early. I'm a human after all, though a teacher. Is there any questions you have about anything? Or, I mean, I'm sorry, but there's not. I really would like to be able to tell you more, but it's not the case. I'm just looking if I've got some message. Okay, right. Good. So, if you are okay with all this, and unless you have other questions, the chat is available. Please do not hesitate and use it. Regarding Esther, as the lockdown boosted your capacity for revolt and criticism of society. I'm sure it has. If it has done the same to you as it has done to me, I feel much more, able to protest right now than I was like 2 months ago. Anyway, okay. What I propose you to do, whatever happens, is that we keep on with the history of the United Kingdom. And this week, I would like to study the transition between before Thatcher and Thatcher. And I'm going to study a very specific moment in the history of the UK, which is called the Winter of Discontent, and the moment when the UK was the sick man of Europe. It's all in the lesson. It corresponds to the period between globally 1974 or 76 and 1979. Okay? Just a reminder. Okay, well, welcome, Jad, and welcome everyone. If you remember, that was like 3 weeks ago, we said that in the 1960s and 70s, problems starting to rise in the UK. And one of these problems, sorry for this, one of these problems was about economic and social tensions. And between at the end of the 1970s, when Labour was in power, when the Labour Party was in power between 1974 and 1979, the United Kingdom started being nicknamed the sick man of Europe, because the British economy was the economy that was really undergoing massive issues, massive problems. I have chosen several documents to tell you about this. This one dates back to, it dates back to January 1979. And it's from The Sun. So I'm sure all of you know The Sun. The Sun is, I'm sorry, I need to unzoom. The Sun is what you call a tabloid. Next week we'll be talking about tabloids, because we'll be studying a specific crisis in the UK called the Falkland Crisis and the role of the media. And The Sun is a tabloid. It means it's a cheap newspaper. It is mostly addressing the working class, and it's read by, it was read at the time by more than 3 million people in the UK. And if you look at the title, you've got Crisis, What Crisis? So it's a reference. There are many pop culture references on this cover page by The Sun. Crisis, What Crisis is an album by a band called Supertramp. You may know this band. And it's a British band. And they had released an album called Crisis, What Crisis 4 years before. And if you look at this, the title goes Rail, Lorry, Job, Chaos, and Jim is James Callaghan. James Callaghan. He was the British Prime Minister at that time. And on this cover page, The Sun is explaining you, I don't know if you can read this, but it's explaining you that because of the strikes that were hitting the UK at that time, the press could not be published as usual. I'm just reading the part called Don't Shoot the Pianist, which is a reference to an Elton John album, Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player. And they say The Sun is much slimmer than usual again today. This is due to an acute shortage of newsprint arising from the lorry driver strike, and is, of course, entirely beyond our control. Just so that our readers and advertisers know exactly what's going on, we would like to explain one or two further consequences of the strike. And so, The Sun was explaining that due to strikes in transportation that were hitting the UK, the economy was stalling. The economy was stopped by the strikes. And that happened during a moment called the Winter of Discontent. This lasted at the end of 1970, between the end of 1978 and the spring of 1979. It lasted for more than 2 months and a half. And during this period, the UK was paralyzed by strikes. And the paradox was that these strikes were organized by trade unions under a Labour government. Another example of what happened at that time, and this has left a lot of traces in the British mindset, is that there was a huge garbage collection strike. Garbage was not collected anymore. I'm just showing you, sorry, I'm just looking for the document. And here we are. That's it. This is the type of pictures and the type of images that were very common during the winter of discontent. You can see the date. It's in London. It's in Soho in London, in the city centre of London. As you may know, Soho is very commercial, but also it's full of theaters and musicals, and it's a cultural centre. And the dustmen, the garbage collectors, were on strike during the winter of discontent, which means that you could see this type of pictures in London. Another one which is very famous is in the neighbourhood, in the district of Finsbury Park. Finsbury Park is another London neighbourhood, and I'm sorry, it's coming. I should have added it before, but I thought I had. Here we go. Finsbury. Okay. That's it. That's the type of scene you could see in London in 1979. Okay? So, what image of the UK did that send? The image of a country in the late 1970s, which was undergoing a dire economic and social crisis. And this economic and social crisis was due to 3 major factors. And I would like to present you with the factors today. The first factor was this. Now, this is a cover page of a book which was written in 1992. And the title of the book is Goodbye Great Britain. And it refers to an event that you can identify from the book. In 1976, the UK's debt was so high that the UK was on the verge of bankruptcy. And the Labour Prime Minister, a man who was supposed to be more socialist, a man who was not supposed to be following the liberal policies, decided to call for the IMF helping the UK. And this man, it was James Callaghan. I'm just going to show you his picture. I'm sorry, I don't know why the software doesn't want to include my images, so I have to go and pick them one by one. It's not very practical. So sorry for these hesitations. Here we go. Where are you, Callaghan? Here you are. Okay. The man on the right. So you've got 2 persons here. On the right, you've got Prime Minister James Callaghan. Jim, if you prefer. He was a Labour. Okay, he was from the Labour Party. So normally, he was supposed to be in favour of Keynesian policies, state spendings, maintaining the welfare state, all that we've seen, and I'm sure you remember this. This is, sitting aside, is the Chancellor, so the man in charge of finance, Denis Healey. And both had to ask the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, for help because the UK was not in capacity to pay their debt. Why do you have such a title, Goodbye Great Britain, to a book which was published to analyze the financial crisis of the UK in 1976? Because that was the title of an article by the Wall Street Journal. You may know that the Wall Street Journal is the first financial newspaper in the world. People who work in the stock exchange, they read the Wall Street Journal every day. So it's like the Bible of the financiers. It's the Bible of the bankers. It's the Bible of the investors. And in 1976, one of their articles was called Goodbye Great Britain, because it told the investors, stop buying sterling pound. Stop defending the sterling currency, the sterling pound currency. The British currency is a weak currency. You should not invest in it. And so Goodbye Great Britain was a way to say the UK is not an economic power anymore. How did that show? How did that show? It showed because I'm sorry, I'm just trying to find some documents again. I hope it's going to work this time. Good. No, it's not working. Okay, good. Right. Sorry for this. I'm really sorry about all this. It's losing some time. Anyway, that's image number 3. Right. Here we go. Here we are. Okay. Good. So, this is an extract from another financial newspaper. You certainly know the name is the Financial Times. Okay, so it's a British newspaper, and it's about the review of a history book called When Britain Went Bust. You know that to go bust is another way to say you go bankrupt or you go in deep crisis. And the reason why there were tensions in the UK is something we've already studied, and you can read this. As the economic historian Richard Roberts notes in When Britain Went Bust, the book, his absorbing lively account of the crisis, the years from 1964 to 1967 witnessed essentially a continuous sterling crisis. From the mid-1940s to mid-1970s, Britain was the heaviest user of International Monetary Fund resources. Can you imagine this? The UK was the country which borrowed the most money from the IMF, which received the highest aid from the IMF. And the paradox, what is the paradox? The paradox is that the UK was a state-subsidized economy. It was an economy that was spending a lot of state money, but it demanded aid from a very liberal institution, because the IMF was created after World War II to promote free trade and to promote liberal economy. So there is a kind of paradox in this. The word was that the IMF ritzy means very luxurious, like the Ritz, like the Hotel Ritz. Okay, so ritzy is very luxurious. The word was that the IMF ritzy Washington headquarters was paid for by the interest on UK loans. So it was a joke saying the UK has spent so much interest in paying back their debt that the IMF has been able to buy a huge and luxurious building in Washington. Britain had emerged from World War II with heavy debts and an unsustainable initial exchange rate in the Bretton Woods system. There was also the problem of the sterling balances, so the fact that the UK was exporting less than it was importing. And by the early 1970s, the second paragraph, the oil producers of the oil-producing and exporting countries had shocked the global economy with dramatic price increases. So the Labour government had a minuscule majority in 1974, in a country where a minor strike had forced power cuts. It means that energy had been cut by the strikes and the economy was heading into stagflation. So clearly, what was the first problem of the UK in the 70s? Debt, a low growth rate, and a rising unemployment. Okay? So, first factor, that's a way for me to answer your question. Okay? In 1976, I'm just repeating what I've said here, okay? In 1976, the UK, you can see it on this book cover. In 1976, the UK was in such debt, was in such financial situation of not being able to pay back its debt, that one more time it had to borrow money from the International Monetary Fund. Okay? This International Monetary Fund help was called by Jim Callaghan. You can see the man with spectacles, the man with glasses on the picture. He was the British Prime Minister and he was Labour. He had to call for the IMF aid. What does that mean? That this time, the IMF wanted more from the UK. And what they wanted from the UK was a cut, a decrease in public spendings. Put otherwise, the IMF told the UK, now, you can't go on like this. You have to reduce your public spendings. You have to reduce the money spent by the state. And clearly, knowing the situation of the UK in the 1970s, there were only 4 ways you could reduce the state spending. Less welfare state. Number 1, less welfare state. Reducing the spendings in the NHS, the medical care. Reducing the spending in benefits given to families, family allowances, sick leaves, and so on and on. That's the first possibility. Problem, when you are a Labour government, it's very hard to decide. Secondly, you could reduce the participation of the state in nationalized industry. So you can privatize. By privatizing the companies, the state could get money used to pay back the debt. But that means turning a part of the UK's sector, industrial sector and service sector, into private sector. Very hard to do when you're a Labour Prime Minister. Thirdly, you can create more. You can create more growth. You can create more economic growth. Okay, but creating more economic growth in the 1970s was very hard. Why? Because that's exactly the moment when the Asian economies, South Korea, Japan, South Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, Hong Kong, were developing fast, and the British industries were being relocated in Asia. That's the moment when the car manufacturing industry in the UK was collapsing. That's the moment when the steel industries were being challenged by the Korean and Japanese steel factories. So you could not inject money into the economy because it was a time of deindustrialization in the UK. Fourth possibility to reduce spendings: reduce armament. The problem is that in the 1970s, it still was the Cold War. Even if it was the détente, it still was the Cold War. And the UK was in NATO. So clearly, it was very hard to reduce the welfare state. It was very hard to privatize industries. It was hard to inject money into the economy because the economy was being challenged by Asian emerging economies. And it was almost impossible to reduce the armament spendings. That was clearly a problem for which solutions were very hard to find. Okay? They tried. And one way to try it was for the Labour Party to attack their very supporters. And the very supporters of the Labour Party are the trade unions. Okay? So, first problem, to summarize, the financial problem, calling for the IMF and the fact that it was very hard for the UK to reduce their spendings. Okay? Problem number one. Second problem, this economic problem started social tensions. Because the Labour Party say, okay, people, we have to reduce our spendings. So, we're not going to increase the salaries for the public servants. And this is how you got to massive strikes. Because these people, like the dustmen, the garbage collectors, they generally worked as public servants. So when the government announced that their salaries would be frozen, they started going on strike. And in 1978, who went on strike? The miners went on strike. The teachers went on strike. The train drivers, lorry drivers, garbage collectors, electricity suppliers, all these people went on strike to oppose the Labour policies. So, of course, it means that it prevented the Labour from really lowering its spendings. Okay? They knew that the people who voted for them would never accept it. And all they got was a paralysis of the British economy. Plus, in 1979, the same year, there was the second oil shock due to the Iran crisis. You know, Iran had become an Islamic republic that year, and it means that there was tension around the oil markets. The oil prices were multiplied by 3. So when you were a country like the UK, which imported a lot of oil, that increased the deficit and the debt. Clearly, that created also social tensions, and these social tensions were through strikes. Tensions were so strong that the miners, listen to me, that's a very important point for later, the miners had a very strong trade union called the NUM, the National Union of Miners. As in the 19th, listen to me, it's quite important to understand this. I've just told you that in the 1970s, it started in 1973, right? In the 1970s, oil was costing more and more. Okay, there had been a multiplication by 4 of the oil prices in 1973. So coal was even more important for the UK's economy. And knowing this, the miners decided to go on strike to obtain a 3-day week. They said, we want to work only 3 days a week. And they obtained satisfaction. Their strike was victorious. The problem, I mean, when I say the problem, I mean, it's a huge social victory. The problem is that mines belong to the state. So the state had to pay the miners for less work. That was the only condition under which the mining activity would go on or would start again. So the state signed a deal with the National Union of Miners saying, okay, we pay you the same and you will work only 3 days a week. Knowing how difficult being a miner is, there's no way of me judging if it was good or bad, okay? I mean, I think for a miner, it's fine to work 3 days a week. The problem is that it increased the difficulties, the financial difficulties of the UK. So, let's start again. A financial crisis, point number one, okay? Second element, this financial crisis created social protest in the UK, not only in the industry, but also in the public, among the public servants, nurses from the NHS, teachers, transportation systems, and so on. Finally, there was another type of problem in the UK. In the 1970s, another problem rose, which was the race tensions. In 1977, I'm just going to show you one more picture. Where is that? It's here. Okay. This is this episode is known as the Battle of Lewisham. And the Battle of Lewisham is a reference to another battle that happened in the 1930s in the UK, called the Battle of Cable Street. The Battle of Cable Street was a confrontation in the 30s between the British Union of Fascists, led by Oswald Mosley, and anti-fascists in the UK. And it remained very well known because you had this confrontation and the fascists had to go away. This one is called the Battle of Lewisham. Lewisham is a neighbourhood, a popular neighbourhood in London. And in 1977, you had a huge demonstration by a hard right-wing party called the National Front. National Front, very easy to translate and not very different from the same party in France at the same time. So the National Front was a nationalist party. It's a extreme right-wing party, and they demonstrated. And as you can see, the demonstration was totally surrounded by policemen, and you had counter demonstrators. If you look at the bottom left-hand side, of the picture, there are counter demonstrators, people who were opposing the National Front. And after some minutes of demonstration, there was a fight and a huge repression by the police. You want me to write Lewisham, apparently? Is that your question? Sorry, I'm just adding some text here. I can't even add some more text. Where is that? Here we are. I'm sorry, I'm just writing this. So it's called Lewisham Battle of Lewisham. And why am I mentioning this? Because since the 1960s, race tensions, I use race in the word which it has today, that it's confrontation between people identifying to communities. Okay, I'm not using the word race as a scientific concept or whatever. Community confrontation. So let me tell you a bit more about this. In the 1940s, just after World War II, the UK had passed something called the Commonwealth Act. The Commonwealth Act said that if you were born in any country of the Commonwealth, you were free to come to the UK as a worker. If you remember, this is how the Jamaican people, people from the West Indies, but also people from India, were able to come and work for the NHS. Unless I'm wrong, I think I mentioned this episode already with the Windrush and the fact that it was the first boat to bring a massive amount of Jamaican immigrants into the UK. I think I mentioned this when I talked about the NHS. Little by little, communities made the UK a more multicultural country. More and more black people, Jamaican people, Nigerian people living in the UK. More and more Indian and Pakistani and Bangladeshi people living in the UK. In the 1960s, tensions between communities with some nationalist groups starting to attack these communities that were seen as foreigners. And at the end of the 1960s, a very famous British politician whose name was Enoch Powell, delivered, I'm going to write his name right, delivered a speech, and his speech was called Rivers of Blood. If you go to the internet, you can find this very easily. And okay. And Enoch Powell made a speech where he said, if we keep on welcoming more foreigners, one day there will be so many tensions between communities that, as in ancient Rome, the Thames, River Thames, and the British rivers will be rivers of blood. There will be like a civil war. So Enoch Powell was calling for a limitation of immigration in the UK. And clearly, at the turning point of the 60s and in the 70s, tensions between the Jamaican community, the Nigerian community, the Indian community, and some nationalists in the UK were becoming stronger. You had more and more racist attacks in the UK and so on. And so there was a risk, or there was not a risk, but there was a feeling that there was the economic crisis, number one. Social crisis with a lot of political protest and strikes and demonstration to get better working conditions, and the miners going on strike, and the UK being paralyzed by strikes, the winter of discontent. Thirdly, there was a risk of a civil war in the UK. I'm not saying there was a risk. I'm saying some people in the UK said, there is a risk of the UK, going into confrontation. And you could see it because the National Front was having more and more influence and calling for getting rid of the foreigners. Just for your information, in France, the first time the Front National at that time and Jean-Marie Le Pen ran for president was in 1974. It means that the moment of the rise of the National Front in the UK and the moment of the rise of the Front National in France were actually exactly the same moment, the mid-1970s. How can you explain this? I think you can explain this mostly by the fact that it was the moment of economic crisis. unemployment was rising fast, and you know what it's like when you are unemployed. You tend to look for scapegoats for this. And who could be better scapegoats than the people stealing your jobs, the foreigners stealing your jobs. That's a very common justification. So the National Front was using the same arguments as the Front National. If we get rid of the foreigners in the UK, if we get rid of the Jamaicans, if we get rid of the Nigerians, if we get rid of the Indians, then we can recover full employment. Okay? Actually, your remark, Sarah, is quite interesting because this period. So I'm going to answer Sarah's question about the joining the police. The Lewisham battle has also remained as the moment when the British police forces have changed their strategies. And that would announce the next decade, the 1980s. Until the 1970s, the British police forces were generally trying to keep demonstrators in a distance, They just were trying maybe to let the demonstration happen, and as long as there was no direct confrontation, things would go like quietly. And the police would rather look from a distance and keep and maintain order without direct intervention. In the Lewisham battle, they had to get into the demonstration, and I wanted to show you a video, but apparently the software is not very stable when I insert video. So if you want to go to a YouTube or you go to a video search, and you will find something called the Battle of Lewisham, and you will see that the police forces were using methods which were much more proactive, like using sticks and truncheons and something like more Gilets jaunes strategy, if you want, something more direct and physical. Okay, and that would be recycled in the next years, in the following years, in all demonstrations. Okay. Good. So, what was the result of all this? The result of all this was that in 1978-79, the Labour Party, which had won the 1974 election with a very, very tiny majority, was totally weakened. And this is a poster, a propaganda poster, which was released by the Conservative Party in 1978, because the Conservative Party knew there would be general elections coming. Okay, general elections coming. And they released this poster, which is, of course, a wonderful pun. It's a wonderful pun and play on words. Labour isn't working. And it's a double pun, because Labour isn't working. Travailler n'est pas du travail. Le travail, ce n'est pas travailler. But also, of course, the fact that Labour was not efficient. And that was related to the fact that many people were now unemployed in the UK. So in terms of, honestly, whatever you think of the Conservatives, in terms of political propaganda, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. At the end of the 20th century, just for your information, if you're interested in communication and advertising, this piece of communication in the UK was elected the best political advertising in post-World War II. Okay, because it proved very efficient. And of course, Britain's better off with the Conservatives the Conservatives were now getting ready for the next election. And you know what was the major change in the next election? It is that now, the Conservatives were led by a leader who said, it's time to totally transform the UK. I don't want to be in the consensus anymore. I don't want the state to support consumption anymore. It's costing the state too much. I'm against Keynesianism. I don't want the state to distribute so much money to individuals, because individuals should be working for themselves. They should take care of themselves. They should not rely on the nanny state, a state that takes care of you from the cradle to the grave. I think the UK should stop spending too much. We need to break the consensus. And this platform by this manifesto by the Conservative Party was carried by a new Tory leader, a new Conservative leader, and I'm sure you've already guessed who the leader was. The leader was Margaret Thatcher. And she was the leader. She had been elected the leader of the Conservative Party in 1975. So she was the leader of the Conservative Party for 4 years when she won the 1979 general elections. And when she was elected, she promised to dismantle the consensus. She promised to totally reform the UK by promoting something we call neoliberal policies, aka Thatcherism. Okay? So I'm going to say a few more words about Margaret Thatcher. I'm not done for today. I'd just like to make an introduction on Thatcherism now, but is that okay? So to put it in a nutshell, and just to conclude on the 1970s, and if you have your lesson in front of your eye, that corresponds to the last part of the lesson about the United Kingdom. So it is just showing you where it goes, actually, just to make sure everybody's okay with that. I should have opened it before, my bad. Good. Where are we? Okay. It was called, it's called 1951, 1979, the Conservative and the Consensus Years, and it's the last part. It's called Reforms in Continuity, the Consensus Years. And as you can see, the last part is about Thatcher. The third part is about Thatcher, and this is the one I'm going to start right now. Do you have any question about why the UK was really, in a bad situation in the 1970s? And if you've understood this, we can move on to what Margaret Thatcher did to change all this. And you can see that's Margaret Thatcher celebrating victory. You're okay? No question? May I go on with Margaret Thatcher and a few words on Margaret Thatcher, if you're okay with that? Yep? Good. Okay. So, who's Margaret Thatcher? You may know this. When Margaret Thatcher died, some people in the UK went down onto the streets to celebrate. And They even sang a song called Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead. Okay? If you go to a video search and you type in Death Thatcher celebration, you've got a large amount of videos filmed, shot in the streets, where people open champagne, where people... I'm just going to check if I can include some video for you, but I'm afraid it doesn't work very well on the software. But clearly, some people were so happy when she died that they went onto the street, opened bottle and so on. I think it's this one, so it may not work very well, but that will at least give you the major vision for this. Let me show you this. I'm not sure that the system will be very happy with all the documents I'm inserting, right? But okay. Okay, right. So no, let's forget about this. It won't work. I'm sorry for this. I thought it would work, but it's always the same. It's not very practical. Anyway, you see people singing in the streets, singing, hey, hey, the witch is dead, and so on. And this song, The Witch is Dead, was released as a record, and it went to number 2 in the charts, which means that people bought the song just to celebrate the death of Margaret Thatcher. Why is that? Why did many people go onto the street to celebrate? Because she's clearly possibly the most controversial politician in post-World War II UK. Some people have praised her for saving the UK from economic collapse, which she did. Her government prevented the UK from a full economic crash. It's the fact. Some people praise her for reforming the UK as deeply as the Labour had reformed the UK in post-World War II, though in a very different manner, in a liberal manner and not in a Labour manner. But she was a great reformer. She was. But also, people have rejected her legacy because she was seen as a brutal politician. She was seen as a politician who did not really care about the working class, who multiplied by 4 the amount of people who were living under poverty levels in the UK. And for actually being a politician whose economic and ideological agenda prevailed over the well-being of the people. So can I say that more differently? Differently and more point blank. If you are a neoliberal, if you believe in free markets, if you believe that society should not care of the people, but that people should take care of themselves, then Thatcher is your hero. If you believe that a society is constituted by people who have to be solidary and that the state should help the community, then normally you abhor her. And she has remained this very controversial personality because she is synonymous with the end of the consensus, with the dismantle of Keynesianism, with policies that would be in favor of the wealthy and not in the favor of the poor, and so on. Okay? That's her legacy. She is the embodiment of neoliberalism. And apparently you won't have any exams this year in the OIB. But this is definitely a classic OIB question, which is, was there a Thatcher revolution? Or evaluate the legacy that Margaret Thatcher has left in the UK. Because actually, Boris Johnson is still following the legacy of Margaret Thatcher. And you may have read articles in France. I'm not going to discuss if they're relevant or not, but you may have read articles in France about Emmanuel Macron being the French version of Margaret Thatcher. Okay, like not as brutal possibly, and that was before maybe the Gilets jaunes, but clearly someone who had the same type of political agenda, you know, more private initiative, more priority given to business, more priority given to people who take care of themselves. C'est facile de trouver du travail, il suffit de traverser la rue. That's very Thatcherian, really. I mean, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm sure you can guess what I'm thinking of this, but I mean, what I mean is that that's totally something Margaret Thatcher could have said. Okay, so where did she come from? What I propose you for today is just to give you some elements to understand who Margaret Thatcher was as a person. And so on next Wednesday, we can start studying what she did when she was elected. If that's okay with you, that's what I'm going to do today. So can you grant me with maybe 10 or 15 more minutes? I mean, if you want to disconnect and leave, I won't feel upset at all, because I know you've got better things to do, certainly. But if you can just allow me for 10 more minutes or 15 more minutes, I would be very grateful for this. Who's Margaret Thatcher? Margaret Thatcher was born in a middle class. And that's important to understand, because she was in the Tory party, she was in the Conservative party, and many people from the Conservative party were really coming from the upper class. People from the nobility, people from the high bourgeoisie, people from, well-off backgrounds. That was not Margaret Thatcher's case. She was born the daughter of a grocer. So she was born in a family where people actually were not well off. I mean, they were comfortable, right? She was not raised in poverty, right? Sorry, Leah, I've just read your comment. That's okay. So, can you please avoid attacking Margaret Thatcher for, physical traits? That's not very. How can I say this? Feminist, I should say. You can attack her on whatever you want, but possibly not on her look. Anyway, so what I mean is that she was born as a son. The daughter, of a grocer. Why am I telling you this? Because when she eventually climbed all the levels in the Tory party, her original background, her social background, was sent back to her, was thrown to her face, as saying, "Hey, how can you know that?" I mean, she's not, she was not raised in the best public schools and so on. Secondly, as you can see from the picture, she was a woman at a time when women had almost no responsibility in big parties in the UK. So she had to fight against her social background, she had to fight against her gender. And she managed to reach this anyway. And so, you see where I'm going? Her own experience, her own personal experience as someone from the middle class and a woman, managing to make it to the top. So she thought it was possible to everybody. If she did it as both a middle class female person to premiership in the UK, everybody could do that. As long as you worked hard, if there is a will, there is a way. If you work hard enough for it, you can get it. So it means that if you don't, it's your fault. So she was a promoter of self-responsibility. I'll be back on this, Leah, about why Scotland hate her so much. Clearly, I can answer in one sentence. In Scotland, you had mines. And in many Scottish places, in many Scottish regions, the mining activity was the only activity that gave the people a living. And that's something we're going to study on certainly next week, not on Wednesday, but next week. She decided to close all the mines in the UK. And there was a huge confrontation with the miners. The miners lost. Many mines were closed. And many families went bankrupt, unemployed. And it means that many mining communities were totally destroyed by the decision by Margaret Thatcher to close the mines. She's also hated in Liverpool for another reason I will explain you. Okay? Yes, absolutely. It joins quite well with the American dream because actually she was Ronald Reagan's best friend. I will discuss about the Reagan-Thatcher relationship. All of Reagan's economic policies were inspired by what Margaret Thatcher had started doing in the UK. So it's not Reagan first, Thatcher second. She was the one inspiring this Reaganomics, the economics of Ronald Reagan. Little by little, she managed to reach a position in the Conservative Party. She was elected several times as a member of Parliament. And in the 1970s, she was able to take the lead in the Tory party, in the Conservative Party. And what is interesting, I'm just going to show you a cartoon. Sorry, I should have copied it, but my bad. It's quite not practical at all, this situation. Sorry, I've got really too many documents. Here we are. Let me show you this cartoon. Sorry, Margaret, I'm just going to erase you right now. So it's still from the same book, okay? Look at this. This is a document, this is a cartoon of Margaret Thatcher, reaching the top position of the Tory leadership. And you can see that to do that, she had to get rid of many male opponents. And she was able to reach the top position of the Tory party only by getting rid of much opposition. And this opposition were double, actually. Firstly, she was a woman. And that certainly blocked her. It's the expression, the glass ceiling, when women have a difficulty to reach the top position. So she certainly met a glass ceiling. But also, even inside the Tory party, even inside the Conservative Party, she was seen as an extremist in the economic field. Why? Because Margaret Thatcher believed in what is known as, sorry for this. She believed in neoliberal policies. What did that consist in? And I'm almost done, okay, with this. Look at this. That's going to be my final document for today. Okay. This cartoon dates back to, unless I'm wrong, it's an American cartoon by cartoonist Carl, and it dates back to the 1990s when she left power, I guess, or it might have been later when she was elected to the House of Lords. I can't remember, anyway. So this cartoon is quite interesting because it is, as you can see, Margaret Thatcher entering the historic figure society. So firstly, that seems to prove that Margaret Thatcher belonged to this club of great historical figures. In the background, you may certainly recognize many figures. So if we take it from, if you go on the left-hand side in the background, you can recognize Queen Victoria. You can recognize Charles V. Charles V is an emperor of Europe, Charles Quint. Okay. If you go on the center, you can recognize Ronald Reagan. You can recognize Abraham Lincoln with the beard in the background. You can recognize some Viking kings. You can recognize Churchill, Stalin, De Gaulle, Jules Caesar as a statue. And in the foreground, you can recognize Adolf Hitler and Mao Zedong. Okay? All very famous people. And why de Gaulle has a phenomenal nose? Because he had a large nose, and when you're a caricaturist, I think it's pure pleasure. Leah, to see your question, yes, shipyards too, but more mines, and also we see some steel and coal, steel and iron factories in Scotland. I'll be back on the impact on Scotland and on Wales and on industrial England on next Wednesday. So I will answer your question more in a more elaborate manner on Wednesday. And if you look at this, you can see I'm looking for the words, I can't find it. Anyway, the stewards announcing Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, escorted by economist John Maynard Keynes. And as you know, John Maynard Keynes is the one that gave his name to Keynesianism. And you can see that she's entering the room with Keynes, but Keynes rolled in a carpet. It means that she is being remembered as the one that in the 1970s and 80s out-fashioned Keynesianism. She made Keynesianism obsolete. So maybe today we are undergoing a crisis which has made Keynes fashionable again. The role of the state having to support the citizens in times of crisis. Okay, so maybe Keynes is coming back under some form. But at that time, she was seen as the one getting rid of Keynes. Okay? And why would she get rid of Keynes? Because she was promoting another economic theory known as monetarism and neoliberalism. And I've told you it was the last picture. I've just lied a bit. The last one is here, but that's my conclusion, so don't worry. Here we are. Oh, this is on Moodle, right? Oh, this is on Moodle. The reason why Margaret Thatcher is remembered is because she had a strong conviction that time was over for the Keynesian model. And she wanted to implement liberal policies as far as possible, as much as possible. She was, you know that Churchill, sorry, I'm just answering Sarah's remark. You know that Churchill was nicknamed the Bulldog. It was his nickname, okay? And that's a reference to the bulldog spirit, the fact that a bulldog is both rather friendly, but if you get too close, it can become a rather aggressive, and barking dog. And so it's like Winston Churchill. He could be friendly, but don't stand too close. So Thatcherism is all about this. Look at this. And that's my conclusion for today. And we'll be back from here. We'll start from here on next Wednesday, if you're okay with that. she was influenced by something called monetarianism. And monetarianism is exactly the contrary of creating more money to support the economy. It's limiting the amount of money in circulation. What does that mean? It means that the state should never give more money, should never create more money, should not give money for people to consume. On the contrary, money should be rare. Because when money is rare, people work more to have it. She also promoted free markets, and she was inspired by the creator of neoliberalism, an Austrian economist called Friedrich von Hayek, and I can present you with the Hayekian ideas, which is exactly the contrary of Keynes, right, next Wednesday. And so what was she looking for? And it's all in the aims. She was looking to end the post-1945 consensus. She was willing to reverse Keynesianism. She wanted to reduce and cut government spending. She wanted to have fewer taxes. She wanted to restrict the public service and bureaucracy. And she wanted to limit government. With Ronald Reagan, she shared the idea that government is not the solution, government is the problem. Okay? And what we see on next Wednesday is how she started implementing these policies and how she almost failed at first. She failed and she was saved by a diplomatic moment called the Falkland War. What saved Margaret Thatcher's political career after 3 years of premiership, which was a failure, was that she won a war. The Falkland War against Argentina. And I will explain you all this on next Wednesday. Okay? So it's been 1 hour and a quarter, and I think it's been plenty of information. So if you're okay with that, I think it's time for us to conclude here. Unless you have questions, I'm always happy to answer your questions or remark or whatever. Was that clear? Was that clear? So Margaret Thatcher was not elected in a clear blue sky. She was elected in a moment of a dire, deep, thorough crisis in the UK, and she had the solution. The solution was Keynesianism is dead. It's not efficient anymore. We have to counter it and go and make a U-turn. It's really like going a U-turn in British politics and go to the opposite direction, which is a neoliberal policy. Okay? Yep. Do you have any question? If you don't, I am down. I'm done. So, see you on Monday. I can't remember. It must be on at 2:15. Not Monday, my bad. Not Monday. Wednesday, 2:15. Okay, from 2:15 to 3. If you're okay with this, I'm fine too. And of course, I'll let you know in case there is any recent news and breaking news from our Cambridge friend. Okay? People, it was a pleasure teaching this class as usual. Take care of you and see you on Wednesday. Okay? Bye-bye.